So in order to understand the problem of vanishing gradients, I am repeating these equations again. So you can cross verify that these are the equations that I have taken from slides above. So it's like the first equation is telling that this is the derivative of the loss function with respect to the weights, and this is the loss function with respect to the weight u. So the problem of vanishing gradients arises because of this factor, which is given over here. And you can see that this factor is common to both the equations. So if we understand this equation with this factor involved, then the same concept can be applied to this equation as well. So let's focus on this part and see what is this problem of vanishing gradient is all about. So in order to understand this, let us first of all see the relation that connects the activation function at hm with that of the activation function at h of m minus 1. And we know this equation already. It's coming from the RNN forward propagation equation, and you can see that the relation between hm and hm minus 1 is through this equation. So let us do one thing. Let's break this equation into two parts. The first part we are calling it as phi of j, which is the inside of this equation, and we are calling it as phi of j as u xj plus w h of j minus 1, and then h of j as tan hyperbolic phi j. So let's keep these two equations in aside for a second, and then we will make use of it. So as you know, we have copied this equation over here. So let us take the jth term involved in this. So the jth term involved in this product will be partial derivative of hj with respect to the partial h of j minus 1. So this is the jth term, which is one of the terms in this product. So what we can do is we can write this in this form. That is the derivative of hj with respect to phi j, and then the derivative of phi j with respect to h of j minus 1. And the reason for doing this chain rule is, as you can see from this equation, that hj is indirectly linked to h of j minus 1 through phi j. That's why we have this chain rule over here. So once we have this chain rule, now what we will do is we will evaluate each of these individual derivatives, this one and this one. So we will evaluate each of these individual derivatives, and then we will multiply them together. So let's focus on each of these derivatives and see what kind of results we will obtain. So let's consider this derivative first. So you can see over here that this is the derivative. So what we will get is, we will get a matrix when you will be taking the derivative of hj with respect to phi j. And the reason for that is, hj is a vector and phi j is also a vector. So if you take the derivative of hj with respect to the phi j, then it will be a matrix, and the entries of that matrix is this one. And you can see that this is a j cross j matrix, where the first entry is the partial derivative of h1 with respect to phi 1, the second element is the partial derivative of h2 with respect to phi 1, and so on. And similarly, the second row will have the partial derivative of h1 with respect to phi 2, the second element will be partial derivative of h2 with respect to phi 2, and so on. And likewise it will go on expanding on this side and on this side. One thing to note is that it's a diagonal matrix that is represented by this one. And the reason for that is, as you can see, that h1, if you take the derivative of h1 with respect to phi 1, then what will that be? If you see this equation here, this one, then it will be the derivative of the tan hyperbolic. But if you take the derivative of h2 with respect to phi 1, then it will be 0, because here that link is not there, because hj is related to phi j, and it's not like it's a hj plus 1 related to phi of j. It's not like this. So if this is not the case, then the derivative of h2 with respect to phi 1 is all 0, and this will also be 0, and this term will also be 0. This term you will get as tan hyperbolic derivative of phi 2. So if you keep on evaluating all these derivatives, what you will get is the diagonal matrix, which will have values along the diagonal. So that's why we are representing it by this expression, which is diagonal tan hyperbolic derivative of phi j. So it will be diagonal of tan hyperbolic derivative evaluated at phi j. So this is basically the result of this matrix when each of these individual derivatives are evaluated. And how about this expression? This expression is actually this expression which we are trying to evaluate. So this expression is evaluated as W, because if you look at this equation and if you take the derivative of phi j with respect to h of j minus 1, then you will be always left with W. So that's why we have W here. So when you multiply this and this to get partial hj divided by partial h of j minus 1, then what you will get is this. And somehow we are interested in the magnitude of this. That's why we have taken the magnitude of partial of hj divided by the partial of h of j minus 1. And through the inequality, what we can do is, as you know that if you take the magnitude of AB, it's always less than individual magnitude. So we are using this identity. So you can write this as this times this. So now what we want to see is, we want to see the maximum value that this function will take and the maximum value that this function will take. So as you can see, it's a diagonal value of derivative of a tan hyperbolic. So we have to see that what is the maximum derivative that the tan hyperbolic have. So what is the maximum value of the derivative that the tan hyperbolic function will have? So we know that the tan hyperbolic function is a bounded function and its maximum value is 1. So this you can cross verify by actually taking the derivative of the tan hyperbolic function, and you will see that the maximum derivative will be equal to 1. So instead of, for example, if tan hyperbolic is not there, instead of this, if somebody is using sigmoid, then the derivative of the sigmoid will have a maximum value of 1 by 4. And again, this value of 1 by 4 is coming due to the reason, if you take the derivative of a sigmoid function, which is this one, if you take the derivative of it, then it will be, the maximum derivative will be 1 by 4. It's coming at this point because it's the steepest point where the derivative will be high. So the maximum value of the derivative that is obtained for this particular sigmoid function is 1 by 4, which is over here. So let's call these values, that is either 1 or 1 by 4, as alpha. And even, you know, this W matrix is all real value matrix. Since it's a real valued matrix, let us say that it is also bounded by a value of beta. So then what we have is that the magnitude of partial hj with respect to partial of hj minus 1 is bounded with this value of alpha beta. Recall that what we are interested in is this expression. As you can see here that we already started with, our main focus was this equation, but we had taken one term out of it, which was a jth term, but now we want product of all these terms together and see what results we are obtaining. So as a result of which, once you substitute the values, what you will get is, you know that each of these terms h of j divided by partial of hj minus 1 is bounded by alpha beta. So it's like basically a product of alpha beta running from k plus 1 till I. So for this product you have only I minus k terms, so it's actually bounded by the value alpha beta to the power of I minus k. So this expression, that is the derivative of hi with respect to hk, is bounded by this. And now the problem comes, like if alpha beta is greater than 1, then what will happen? If alpha beta is greater than 1, then this series will explode. And if alpha beta is less than 1, then this series will vanish and will become closer to 0. So you know, by saying that it explodes and vanishes, we have to see what it means actually. So you can see that this term is actually dependent upon this particular factor, which either explodes or vanishes. So let us consider when it is vanishing, that is when it is becoming closer to 0. So you can see that this term, so you observe that this term which is over here, or this term, is basically affecting partial L with respect to partial W. So if this term is basically affecting this derivative, then, and we are saying that this is becoming closer to 0 in terms of when the gradients are vanishing, then what will happen? Then the partial derivative of L with respect to partial derivative of L with respect to W will become close to 0. And if that happens, then the update rule that we are writing, that is W is equal to W minus alpha partial L with respect to partial W. So this will vanish. And if this vanishes, your weights will not get updated. So this is the case when your gradients are getting vanished. So vanishing gradients. So and the second case is when your gradients are exploding, and in that case what will happen is that this term becomes very high. If that becomes very high, what will happen? The derivative of L with respect to W will become very high. If the derivative of the loss with respect to W becomes high, then what happens is overshooting of the gradient descent will happen. As you can see from this equation, if this derivative is very high, then you will have overshoot in the gradient descent. So let me explain that. So if you have a convex function like this, and if you take the derivative at this point, and if this derivative is becoming very high, then what will happen is in the next update, the W may move this point to this point. And then in the second update, it might happen that it will again move this point to this point. And in the third update, it will move to this point and like this. So if this type of situation happens, you will never hit the minima and your gradients will explode. So this kind of situation occurs when your gradients are exploding and you will never hit to the minimum. So as we have discussed that RNN is suffering from the problem of vanishing gradients. So what can be done in order to avoid these vanishing gradients? So there are three different ways in which you can avoid these vanishing gradients. So let's discuss each of them one by one. So in the first approach, what we are doing is, if you see this equation, what it is saying? It is saying that alpha beta to the power of I minus k. This is the product. So when it will be maximum? It will be maximum when the value of I is capital T and the value of k is 1. That means what you are doing is you are actually taking the back propagation from the last unit of the RNN till the first unit of the RNN. So you are taking the back propagation from the last unit, that is at time t, till the first unit of the RNN, that is at time t equal to 1. So if alpha beta is less than 1, then if you are raising it to the power of t minus 1, then it will be very less. And similarly, if alpha beta is greater than 1 and you are raising it to the power of t minus 1, then it will be very high. So how to avoid this? To avoid this situation, what we do is we use truncated back propagation in time, and by saying that means what you will do is you will look up to some specific point, that is k over here, and you will neglect the back propagation after this step. So in that situation, your alpha beta will be to the power of t minus k, and this is less as compared to t minus 1, and this k has to be decided. So this type of back propagation where we decide this margin, that is that this line k beyond which we will not do the back propagation, is called as truncated back propagation in time. So this is the first way of avoiding the problem of vanishing gradients. The second way of avoiding the problem of vanishing gradients is using the approach of clipping. In clipping approach, what we do is, as you know that we are interested in the direction of the derivatives, that is partial L with respect to partial W. So we are interested in the direction in which it is moving. So what we do is we actually clip these derivatives to lie in between a specific range, and if it goes beyond that range, what we do is we clip it so that it will again lie in this specific range. So this type of approach is called as clipping of the gradients, and we can do this approach using TensorFlow very easily. That is, you can clip the gradients and make them lie in a specific range so that it should not either explode or vanish. So this is the second way of avoiding the vanishing gradients. The third way of avoiding the vanishing gradient is to use advanced architectures like LSTM and GRUs. So we will discuss these two architectures also and see how the problem of vanishing gradient is solved using these two architectures. So this finishes off with the architecture details of RNN. Thanks for watching my lecture. See you next time.